Hey folks, welcome to Chapter 13, coming to you today from our Mission Valley campus where we house our MBA students. Today we're going to be talking about distributing and promoting products. So really chapter is all about going from raw materials to finished products to consumer. And so we're going to talk a lot about the pathway for one product. And so we'll jump right in and get going. First of all, there's really three different distribution channels that are most common in business. And so marketing organizations that direct product from the producer to the ultimate user. That's basically the distribution channels and market coverage. The three different distribution channels are producer to consumer, which is used by all services and some consumer goods. So you might think of pest control, goes right from the producer to the consumer. Or you might think of legal services. The lawyer interacts directly with the customer. Or you might think of dental services or hair care services. And so those are really that one step producer to consumer. Producer to retailer to consumer. Basically, retailers buy products from other middlemen and then sell it to consumers. So if you think of companies like Billabong manufacturers, and then they sell to Nordstrom or Jack's or Doheny Surf Shop, and then that's sent over to the consumer. Or you might think of a company like even Apple. Apple is produced. Apple then will sell at their own retail store. However, they also sell through Amazon or they sell through Best Buy. And so that's that producer to retailer to consumer. Okay. And then the third and the last one is producer to wholesaler to retailer to consumer. And so a company produces a product and then they sell it to a wholesaler like Cisco. And then Cisco will take in turn and they will distribute that to retailers like 7-Eleven or other convenience stores or maybe Ralph's. And so then that store sells it to the consumer. So the big part there is they've added a fourth component, which is the wholesaler. And then wholesalers sell a product, again, firms. This is really what we call the traditional channel. So that's what that looks like. So those are the three different types of commonly used distribution channels. Here's really what they look like. So for consumer products, again, you go producer to consumer. So that's that. A lot of services will undertake that. We'll talk about this in class a little bit about what might be a product that does this. Then the other one is producer to retailer to consumer, and then producer to wholesaler to retailer consumer. And then here's a fourth one that is really rarely used. It's that producer to agent or broker to wholesaler to retailer to consumer. Okay. Now those are consumer products. Those are the products that we purchase as individuals. So for business products, you also have two different unique distribution channels. And those are producer to organizational buyers and then producer to agent middleman to organizational buyers. So what you might think about is, so lumber is a perfect example. The sawmill produces the lumber, sells it to a middle person who then turns around and sells it to Home Depot or Dixie Line or Lowe's. Anything that's manufactured, steel, if you're manufacturing steel beams, again, a producer takes the raw material, manufactures into steel beams, sells it to an organization who then in turn sells it to either the end user construction company or to potentially a retailer. So next we have wholesalers. So we're going to talk a little bit about wholesalers. So wholesalers are extremely important in this entire process because they really do provide two great services. And so they help both retailers and the manufacturers. So there's lots of different wholesalers out there. McDonald's has a wholesaler that they actually use. So the wholesaler of McDonald's will purchase products from McDonald's and other organizations, and they'll specifically, it's a separate entity of McDonald's, but then they'll turn around and they'll sell it to McDonald's stores, primarily franchisees. But then there's wholesalers. Again, Sysco is probably the biggest one that I can think of that wholesales. There's a lot of wholesalers within the lumber industry. And so we'll explore these more as we proceed in class. But basically what wholesalers do, they help retailers buying in large quantities and then selling to the retailers in smaller quantities and delivering those goods to retailers. So if I'm a small retailer, say I'm Jack's Surf Shop, and I want to buy, a bunch of shirts, t-shirts. Well, if I went directly to Billabong, or I went directly to Patagonia or Quicksilver or Volcom and tried to buy those, I'm not going to get as good of a price because I'm not buying in bulk. Or even Jack's is bigger. Think of a really small mom and pop surf shop. If I go to any of these companies and I try and buy product for them, I can't buy enough in bulk. And so what the wholesaler does is the wholesaler goes to these organizations and they buy in mass. They buy in bulk. And what they can then do is then they can turn around and sell to the retailer at a reduced cost. And so what they're doing is they're providing this particularly small retailer. I'm not talking about Nordstrom, or I'm not talking about Best Buy or any of those bigger, department stores. They can buy in bulk, and they're fine doing that. But if you think about a small mom and pop shop who wants to also be able to get that bulk price, what they'll do is they'll go through a wholesaler. That wholesaler goes out, purchases in bulk, gets a discount, can then turn around and sell to these smaller organizations at a reduced cost, which means then they can make more profit. Okay. So they'll also go there and they'll stock the equipment. So if you go to a 7-Eleven store, and sometimes at night you'll go and you'll see the Coke truck go in there and they're doing all the stocking, or the Frito-Lay person, they're doing all the stocking. And so Frito-Lay buys products and then turns around, wholesales it, and sells it to, at a discounted price, they'll sell it to the smaller stores, and they'll go in stock. So they do all the stocking, they do all the everything that this store can't do, right? If you go to a Ralph's has people that stock. If you go to even a Whole Foods, they have people that stock. Think about these small convenience stores, maybe a family-owned convenience store. Coca-Cola will come in, Frito-Lay will come in, or candy distributors will come in, and they'll stock these. So that's the other service that they provide for retailers. So they buy in large quantity so they can sell to the retailers at a reduced cost, and then they actually do the stocking, and all the goods are right there, okay? The other thing they do is they actually help the manufacturers by providing a sales force. I go out, buy from the manufacturer, and then I'm actually going to go and sell as the wholesaler. I'm going to sell to the retail end market. And so they provide a sales force. They reduce inventory costs by making sure that products are moved in and out. They assume a lot of the credit risk, and they furnish market information. They tell the manufacturers what's selling, what's not selling, who's buying. And so there's this great partnership. Nobody until recent years, nobody really cared or knew about the wholesalers. And so it's really important to understand who they are. If you think about it, probably one of the best wholesalers that you'll know is Costco. Costco's a warehouse wholesaler. They buy, sometimes manufacture, but they'll buy from the manufacturer, and then they'll turn around and sell it, and they'll sell it to smaller retailers. If you go to a Costco, you'll go through and you'll see all sorts of people buying, waters, big, large quantities of waters and sodas and beer and wine and all these things. Then they turn around, they're small retailers, most likely mom and pop retailers. They get it at Costco for a lower rate because Costco can purchase from the manufacturers at a lower rate, and then they'll turn around and then they'll go and they'll resell it. And then we get to take advantage of that as well by going and just purchasing stuff from Costco because, again, we may not be a retailer, but as an end user, as a consumer, they also fill that need. So we'll talk a little bit more about Costco. But so those are really how the wholesalers help. They help retailers by buying large quantities, and they help the wholesalers in a number of ways, providing sales force, inventory costs, assuming credit risks, and then furnishing market information. So there's three types of full service wholesalers. There's the general merchandise wholesaler. That's kind of the Costco I would consider general merchandise. They sell everything. They deal in a wide area of products, such as drugs, hardware, non-perishable foods, cosmetics, detergents, tobacco. And so that's kind of the general merchandise wholesaler. The limited line wholesaler, really, they stock only a few select products. You'll see there's a couple of dairy wholesalers out there that carry, ice cream, butter, milk, different types of milk products. And so those are limited line wholesalers. And then the specialty line wholesaler, that really, they carry one group of products. And so think a used car. There's a big wholesale used car market right now, particularly post-COVID. And so those are really the three types of full service wholesalers. The other thing I want to touch here really quickly is just marketing intermediaries. I don't want you to get confused that marketing intermediaries are marketing firms, right? Some of you are going to be in marketing and go work for a digital marketing firm. Those are not marketing intermediaries. A marketing intermediary is a retailer, right? It's the final stage of sale, right? It's where raw materials finally wind up in the consumer's hands. And so again, think of Nordstrom, think of Saks, think of Vons, think of Whole Foods. Any of these retailers that you go purchase stuff from, those are what we call in the business world marketing intermediaries. And so retailers are really the final link between producer and consumer. They may buy either from wholesalers or the producers. They can sell goods, services, or both. The United States has nearly 1.1 million retail establishments with total sales of over $4 trillion. And then here's the interesting thing, which we don't think of. Most retailers are extremely small with revenues less than $1 million. Just think about your local convenience store, not the big 7-Eleven or Citco or Circle K. I'm talking about, again, the mom and pop store that's down the street from you that literally it's been family owned for 30 years. There are millions of those across the country, but we only look at the big ones. We only look at the larger organizations that we're purchasing from. But think about how much time you just spend shopping at a small mom and pop shop, or maybe it's a small swimsuit shop down in PB, or a small dress shop in Hillcrest. There's all sorts of these small companies. If you think about it from this perspective, in San Diego, which we will touch on, in San Diego, 90% of all the companies have fewer than 100 employees. Okay? 90% of the companies in San Diego have fewer than 100 employees. There's a lot of small companies out there. And so again, when you think about the wholesaler, they're really providing the service for them. Okay? Here's the big ones, right? Here's the 10 largest U.S. retailers. Topping the list is Walmart. Not even close. I joke a lot about, we'll talk a lot about deeper purpose, but I joke a lot about Jeff Bezos. His deeper purpose has always been to destroy Walmart, to take over Walmart, to be the everything to everybody. If you look how much ground he's got to gain to catch up to Walmart, it's not even funny. He will never surpass Walmart. Again, if you live here in San Diego, if you live here in California, we're not a big Walmart area. There just aren't a ton of Walmarts unless you go up the Central Coast. But you go anywhere really east of Arizona or west of New York, Florida, well, Florida even has a lot of Walmarts. That entire flyover section of the United States inundated with Walmarts. And so it's something to think about. We're only concerned about what's kind of in our area. Walmart is huge. And then you've got Amazon, you've got Kroger, which is a grocery store. You've got obviously Costco, Home Depot, Walgreens, CVS, Target, Lowe's, and then Albertsons. Those are the big 10, folks. And they're pretty solidified in their standing. Walmart is going to be next to impossible to take over. Everybody's just way too far behind. So, category killer. This is, I only bring this up because I want you to be aware again of large store versus small store. I just think about, in my neighborhood, we've got this place called San Carlos Hardware. And it's a small hardware store. And you can buy some things there, but they can't compete against Home Depot. I will try and shop there because, again, it's a family-owned small company. So when I need, small things for the house, I'll usually go up and purchase for them. But if I need something large, I'm going to Home Depot. Why? Because San Carlos Hardware can't compete with the pricing that Home Depot can. They can't get the quantity of product that Home Depot can. And so if I'm looking for lumber or, anything, tools, I'm going to Home Depot because they're so large that they afford me a better opportunity to get a price. San Carlos can't do that. However, they call it a category killer because they're so large. They basically wipe out, and because they can sell their product for so cheap, they basically wipe out all the small companies. Think about Starbucks. How many mom and pop coffee shops has Starbucks put out of business? And it just is what it is. They're very large. They're specialized in what they do. They usually concentrate on a single product line or a similar line of products. And so it's hard for smaller organizations to compete with this. They just can't. And so again, think about this category killer thing. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. We'll talk about that. Let's move on to physical distribution. I'm seeing a lot more jobs, just so you know, in distribution, supply chain management, logistics, inventory analytics. And so I want to bring this up because I want you to know about this. So basically, physical distribution is all the activities concerned with the efficient movement of products from producer to consumer, the ultimate user. The movement of products through their channels of distribution. So we talked about the distribution channels, and then it combines several interrelated business functions. So inventory management, do we have the product to ship? Order processing, somebody called in to order, do we have the inventory? Housing it all, we got to keep it all safe. Material handling, and then the transportation. How do we ship it out? Do we ship it out by FedEx? Do we ship it out by ground, air, train? So things to think about. Inventory management, it's basically managing inventories to minimize waste, particularly when it comes to perishable goods like foods, not canned foods necessarily, but dairy, vegetables. Inventory management is key because you don't want to hold inventory. Holding inventory costs an exorbitant amount of money. It costs a lot of money to hold inventory. And so the more inventory you hold, the more it's going to cost you. There's this fine line between holding enough inventory to know what your consumer needs to be able to provide services to the consumer, and then not holding so much that you have to store it. And so again, that's where that wholesaler potentially can come into play and say, hey, here's how much they're asking for. Make sure this is how much you produce. So we want to make sure if you don't want to hold it too long, but if you have stock out, if you're out of stock, then you don't get to sell that. So there's this fine line we'll talk about later. Order processing is about just the activities involved with receiving and filling orders. And then warehousing, receiving goods, storing goods, dispatching goods, holding goods, recalling, picking, assembling goods, dispatching shipments, All these things are affiliated with this whole section of inventory management. Materials handling and transportation. Materials handling basically is the physical handling of goods in warehouses, as well as during transportation. Several smaller cartons, so unit loading, several smaller cartons, barrels, boxes are combined into a single standard size load. So you combine all these smaller ones into a bigger one. And then the transportation is about shipment of the products to the customers. You can have common carriers, like FedEx, UPS, USPS, contract carriers, private carriers, and then freight forwarders. I want you to spend a little bit of time on this one. This is really the comparison of costs for transportation modes. The main transportation modes are railways, trucks, pipelines, waterways, and then airplanes. And it goes from basically what the cost is. Railroads are pretty moderate. Pipelines are extremely low. You build a pipeline, but what you're shipping through there is either natural gas, oil and petroleum, or water, or chemicals, maybe something like that. But for the most part, just so you know, the highest cost is airlines. The lowest cost is pipeline. The highest speed is airlines. The dependability, airlines is pretty high. Pipelines is pretty high. Trucks are pretty high. The frequency is pretty average for all of them other than railways. We just don't ship much by railways too much anymore. Load flexibility, railways is really high. Trucks are average. Pipelines are very limited. You really can't ship much but liquids or gas, natural gas. And then waterways are pretty limited. So just think about this. To ship something via plane, that's the most expensive, but it gets there probably quicker, and it's potentially the most reliable. So supply chain, we're going to specifically talk about this in class. Basically, supply chain is all the things that happen between raw material to consumer. And so you move through this system of supplier, factory, distribution, retail, consumer. And we're going to talk about this within your industry groups. What does your supply chain look like for your product within your industry? And so it's basically the long-term partnership among different channels. And we'll talk about this more in class. But just know that supply chain right now in terms of careers is huge, right? Again, COVID, we realize that we have a terrible supply chain issue. We realize that we don't have the products, we don't have the raw materials that we need. And we'll talk about this also in relation to why we need to be so environmentally conscious, because without raw materials, we can't get a lot of the things that we want. So we'll talk more about that. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about in class about personal selling. This is kind of the end piece of the supply chain. We have the manufacturer, we have the raw material, and at the end you've got somebody selling products. And so there's really 6 components to selling, and many of you are going to probably go into sales or business development. It's something to think about. So we'll talk about this in class, but really the 6 steps are prospecting. Who are my customers? Who should I be looking at to selling? Approaching the prospect. So how do I go to them in person? Do I, like a solar, do I go knock on their front door? Do I pick up the phone? Do I reach out through LinkedIn? How does that happen? How do I approach that potential prospect? And then I make a presentation. Why is my product better than any other product that they could get? Why is my service more effective than any other service they could get? And then answering objectives, right? They're always going to be, so why should I go you instead of somebody else? And then you have to answer that objection. And then closing the sale. Do we have a deal? And then the follow-up. This is, to me, the most important piece. Actually, the first and the last piece. Prospecting is huge. You have to know who your customer is or you're wasting your time. Know that your potential for that customer is to sell to them, and then make sure it's the right. So again, make sure it's the right people. And then the follow-up. Are they getting everything that they're getting that they need to get out of your product? And so the first and the 6th step are really the 2 most important things. Everybody thinks it's about the closing. Not at all. If you have the right product for the right customer and you call that customer and then you follow up with them to make sure everything's good and you continuously follow up with them, you're going to have a better opportunity to not only complete the sale, but maintain a longer term relationship for further sales. So that's it. That is chapter 13 in a nutshell. You can also access the full PowerPoint slides in Canvas. And again, like I said, we'll talk about this more in class. I want you to have a great day, though. Bye.